Is death being served in hospitals? It's a fair question, and it's one that we're going to answer today on the exam room. Welcome, friends, to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for watching and downloading in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. Now, let's start today with a visualization exercise. I want for you to think of a building. In this case, I want for you to think of a sobriety center. Now, on the top floor, you have rehab for people who are detoxing and coming off of drugs and alcohol. On the floor below that, you've got AA, where people are maintaining the sobriety. And then on the ground floor, you have a full-blown bar where people are serving beer and wine and spirits by the gallon. It just doesn't seem to make any sense, does it? And yet, when it comes to other aspects of our health, a very similar situation is playing out in thousands of hospitals across the country. People come in for these life-saving procedures. We're talking about pacemakers and stents and bypass surgery, tumor removal, chemotherapy, you name it. And just a floor or two below that, you have high-fat, artery-clogging fried foods being served up by the truckload. Indeed, our fast food nation is definitely present in our hospitals. The giants of the hospital system, the giants of the fast food industry, they have merged. We're talking about the likes of McDonald's and Burger King and Chick-fil-A. They have taken over the cafeterias and they are serving the very foods that brought patients there in the first place. But the good news is Americans are fed up. In fact, we have done a survey here at the Physicians Committee that shows that the majority of Americans say, hey, we got to put an end to this. We have to get the fast food out of the hospitals. And talking about the ramifications of this and the survey is a first-time guest on the show. She is a colleague of mine. She is from South Africa. And so even though this information can be difficult for some of us to digest, at least there's a very sweet accent to try to help us wash it down. With that, we welcome Dr. Roxanne Becker to the exam room for the first time. Thanks for being here, Doc Rox.
Thanks so much for having me, Chuck.
All right, that analogy at the top of the show, do you think that that's pretty accurate in terms of a sobriety center and then on the ground floor there being a bar? Is that very similar to what's happening in hospitals with the fast food in the lobby?
You know, Chuck, I couldn't have said it better myself. You are so spot on. We are feeding people the food that brought them there in the first place. And as hospitals, right, they're supposed to model what a healthy diet is. People are going in there, being sick, wanting to get healthy. This is the perfect place to help them to change their habits, teach them what they should be eating. And yet we are just making them repeat customers, unfortunately.
It seems like a revolving door. I mean, if I were to create a business, I was like, well, what can I do to get a good return on my investment? That is something that seems to me would make a whole lot of business sense. May not exactly be ethical from where I'm sitting either, but from a business standpoint, man, they're doing gangbusters.
Yeah, repeat customers. You just keep them coming through those doors.
Yeah, so let's talk about this survey here before we talk about really the health ramifications there. What did we find with regards to the way that the majority of us are feeling about this?
Well, let's just take a step back and set the scene. So in 2006, there was someone named Dr. Lesser, and he had the same question that we have. Are hospitals having fast food restaurants in their, in the downstairs? Are people being exposed to this? And so he did a survey of medical students, and he asked these students from 113 different medical schools, the hospitals that you're rotating through, do they have fast food restaurants? And these medical students answered him, and he added all this data together and found that 63% of the hospitals that these medical students were rotating through had fast food restaurants in them. And over the last sort of 2 decades, a lot more science has come out. The AMA, the American Medical Association, put out a resolution saying we need to move towards plant-based foods. We need to get processed meats out of hospitals. The World Health Organization put out a report about this. So we have all the science saying we need to get fast food and processed meats out of hospitals. So in 2024, do you think that that has improved at all? So that's what we did. We did a survey very similar to Dr. Lesser's survey to see if things had changed or if they'd improved. And I've brought a few slides with some of our results that I can share with you.
That would be great. Yeah, let's see what we have here. And this was published recently, so anybody can access that. We've dropped a link, by the way, in the episode notes if you want to pull up the survey for yourself and do a deep dive into the findings.
Yes, if you want to geek out on this, please do. This was published in September of this year. So this is brand new data published in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine. So we surveyed 146 schools and we asked the medical students, do the hospitals that you rotate at have any fast food restaurants? Right, over half of them said yes. 15%, there was a mixed response. So some students said yes, some students said no. Some of them were rotating through different hospitals, but really 69% of these hospitals associated with medical schools had at least one fast food restaurant in them. So we're actually getting worse off, right? Dr. Lesser's study said 63%. We're now seeing 69%. So even though all this amazing science has come out, we're not doing any better. Some of the top culprits were Starbucks. I can't really be too mad about that, right? I love my coffee. And if you're having black filter coffee, it's not a problem. If you're adding all the mocha choca frappuccino syrups and chocolate chips and all those things, probably not the best idea. Subway, Chick-fil-A, McDonald's is still in the top 5. This is really scary stuff. And something else that's a little bit scary, and this for me might actually be one of the scariest parts. We asked these students that we surveyed, do you think that this is acceptable, right? Is it acceptable for restaurants like McDonald's to be in hospitals? Only around half of the medical students said they disagreed with that statement, which means they thought it's unacceptable. We need to get fast food restaurants out of these hospitals. What's really scary is that around half of medical students either thought it was acceptable or didn't really have much of an opinion on it. So we're having these medical students that are going through 4 years of medical school, going through residency, learning how to treat all of these chronic diseases. They're not getting nutrition training. And a lot of them think that it's okay for McDonald's to be sitting in these hospitals.
That's pretty mind-blowing to me. And, you know, I think that, I mean, we can talk about this. Is a Starbucks the same as a McDonald's? It possibly can be, but as you said, you know, there's nothing really wrong with a black cup of coffee either. By the way, I'm curious for the exam roomies who are watching live, do you guys have fast food options in your hospitals as well? Let us know in the chat, or also if there's a question that you have for Dr. Becker, post that in the chat as well, and we'll get to as many of them as we can here on the program today. You know, I do find it interesting that Starbucks and McDonald's are kind of grouped together. I mean, do you view them as a doctor as being on the same playing field?
Well, if you look at the kind of food that they serve, aside from the black coffee, which I say is totally okay, at McDonald's, if you go there for breakfast, you can get a bacon and egg McMuffin, right? If you go to Starbucks, you can get a bacon and egg muffin or bagel, whatever it is. So really, if we're looking at the types of foods that are served at these restaurants, they can pretty much be the same. You can get donuts from McDonald's, you can get donuts from Starbucks. So aside from the black coffee, if we're looking at the food they're serving, they're high in saturated fat, high in added sugars, high in cholesterol, low in fiber. And so, you know, whether you're getting a bacon and egg muffin from McDonald's or Starbucks, it's not really that different.
Yeah, and Video 1000 Nights also has a good point there. So, well, what about going to Subway and getting a whole wheat roll and then every vegetable that they have to offer there, plus some avocado? Certainly, I mean, that's kind of like going to Starbucks and getting that black cup of coffee as opposed to that choca, mocha, whatever latte frappuccino you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, so you can make healthful options. And if you're going to Chipotle, right, you can get a bowl with the brown rice and some black beans and some veggies. So you definitely can make healthier options at some of these fast food restaurants. Majority of Americans that are going to these restaurants are probably not choosing those options, unfortunately. And we're seeing that. We're seeing the results, right? America is getting so sick. heart disease, diabetes, all of these diseases are on the rise. We spend around $250 billion every single year on conditions that are related to obesity. And so these fast food restaurants are making us sicker. We go to the hospitals to get better. And again, we're being fed from these fast food restaurants. So like you said, it's a revolving door, repeat customers, and something really needs to change.
Karen says that she's watching today in Germany. Thanks for tuning in, Karen. She says, I've yet to see any fast food outlets in hospitals in Germany. I'm curious, when you were back home in South Africa, was that commonplace there as well? Or is this a very uniquely American idea?
There definitely was. I definitely saw McDonald's and fast food restaurants in the hospitals back home. And I worked in a lot of public hospitals, which deal with people from low income areas. And so even if big chain stores or big chain restaurants like McDonald's weren't in those hospitals, there were smaller restaurants where you could get the deep fried fries and hot dogs and bacon burgers and everything. So the food was very similar back home, even if we didn't have some of these big brand names that we see in America in some of our hospitals. But definitely it's the same issue back home.
Yeah, you know what? And Stephen, who's watching right now in Canada, again, love the global feel of the exam room. He says that there is a Timmy Hortons in the hospital there. He says, lucky enough, he rarely has to go. Debbie, who's watching in Southampton, UK, says that there's also fast food in the hospitals there. So I'm curious, though, like if we were to actually look at just how detrimental this food can be. Because we all know that fast food, by and large, is not healthy for us. But let's go ahead and pull up the nutrition calculator at McDonald's and just maybe put together a combo meal and take a look and see, well, what are we really doing to our bodies here? I think that could be kind of eye-opening here. So I've gone ahead and I've pulled up the nutrition calculator, which anybody can do on McDonald's website right now. So let's go ahead and build a combo meal. Let's say, Dr. Becker, we're going to get ourselves a Big Mac, which starts at 590 calories. That's cool. We'll just add that. We'll keep it standard. And then let's go and add some French fries to that. And we'll get the world famous fries. Nobody gets the small combo
No one
meal.
gets the small.
So let's just go for medium. All right. Let's say that we're trying to keep it healthy. We'll get the medium. And then we will also get a Coke to drink with that. Beverages, there we are. Coca-Cola. Well, actually, I'll let you choose since you're the guest. What would you like to drink with your lunch today?
Oh, do I have to choose? This is becoming quite a scary exercise, Chuck.
Yeah, right?
Let's go for, you know what, is there a Diet Coke? Let's maybe do a Diet Coke if there's one, because I see that so often. People say, I'm going to get the Big Mac, large fries, but I'm being healthy, so I'm going to get the Diet Coke, right? So let's see. Does it actually make much of a difference?
All right. World famous fries. It says no ketchup packet right there. Let's go ahead and, yep, there we go. Ketchup packet. Just in case you were curious about the ingredients of the French fries, it's not just potatoes, my friends. And also, so you do have tomatoes and the ketchup, vinegar, high fructose corn syrup, regular corn syrup, water, salt, and natural flavors. Those always scare me. I don't know why you need two kinds of corn syrup in a ketchup packet, but there you go. So let's go ahead and scroll up and take a look at this combo meal that we're serving up. Now, as a doctor, you see this total here, Dr. Becker, 910 calories. Hey, where do you get your protein from? A Big Mac combo meal, 30 grams, a whole bunch of but look at the fat total, right? Almost 50 grams of fat in a single meal. The cholesterol, 85 milligrams. How would you rate this on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of being a healthy meal, with 10 being as healthy as possible and 1 being as unhealthy as possible? Where would this fall in your spectrum?
Can we go into the negatives?
All right,
No,
what really jumps out to you?
I'll try to be generous. There is 7 grams of fiber between the whatever kind of potatoes there are and the bun and the half a handful of lettuce. There's some fiber. So maybe let's rate this at like a 1, maybe 2 out of 10 at a maximum.
What really jumps out at you as something that is really alarming? Is it the 13 grams of saturated fat? Is it the 910 calories? Is it the 85 milligrams of cholesterol? What's jumping off the page at you?
So really the top 3 things that scare me about this. First one is the calories, right? If you're thinking an average person gets around 2,000 calories a day, If you're trying to lose weight, you might be aiming for a little bit less than that. Of course, it depends on your sex and your weight and your goals and all of that. But say an average person gets around 2,000 calories a day. This is one meal, might not even be feeling very full after this, and it's already half of your calories per day. So you're not feeling full. You've already had half your calories per day. You're going to keep eating. And this is how people end up overeating so much. And we know that excess calories are linked to weight gain and diabetes and heart disease and all these things. So number one, the calories is really scary. Number two, that saturated fat content. We know that saturated fat is one of the most important dietary risk factors for heart disease and for elevated cholesterol. So we're seeing there 13 grams, 66% of the total amount of saturated fat you're meant to get in a whole day is in this one meal. And we should be aiming for lower than that. So the saturated fat is scary. And then what actually jumps out to me is the sodium, right? 1,400 milligrams, the last one over there. So we should be aiming for around 2,000 milligrams of sodium each day. If you are at a high risk of having a heart attack or you have high blood pressure, you really want to keep it at 1,500, even lower. You're getting that an entire meal. So, I mean, this is just cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, and a heart attack in a meal.
And it's being served at a hospital. Go figure.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that is just wild. So I would love for you at some point to analyze my old Taco Bell binge, because it was about 4 or 5 times the amount of calories, fat, sodium, like all of the above. Like it was just insane. Every single day I was eating that. So not exactly the healthiest thing. As a doctor, I mean, that's got to be pretty frustrating. When did you first start realizing the link between health and nutrition? Because I'm asking because if it was in medical school, if you were a first day student and you got that survey that we sent out to the medical school students, would you not have an opinion about fast food in a hospital, or did it kind of shift as your medical career advanced?
So I must say, I had a very healthy upbringing compared to a lot of people. My mom was very health conscious. So if I got that survey in the first year of medical school, I probably would have maybe been borderline, probably somewhat disagreed that it's acceptable for fast food restaurants to be in hospitals. But really my eyes were opened in second year of medical school when I went plant-based for ethical reasons. And I started doing all of my own research because, again, this hadn't been taught in medical schools. We learned about vitamin deficiencies, scurvy, which I don't know when the last case of scurvy was, but I know that's from vitamin C deficiency because that's what we learned about. Didn't learn about the role of nutrition in preventing disease. But then I did all this research by myself and I went into the hospitals and I saw people suffering from all of these chronic diseases linked to their diet. And I thought, why are we not being taught about this in medical schools? And so really there is a deficiency in nutrition knowledge and nutrition teaching in medical schools. And that's part of the work that we do at the Physicians Committee is we have these lunch and learns where we're trying to take control of this and offer medical students education and presentations to teach them about the role of nutrition. But really, medical students do not learn much about nutrition. And we saw that in the survey results when a lot of them thought it's completely acceptable to have McDonald's in hospitals.
Yeah, well, speaking of lunch and learn, Gail at 1213 says, I worked in the cardiology department at a hospital, and at the monthly section meetings, AB's monthly conferences, they had her order lunch. Cardiology, all they would order were cold cuts. Cold cuts. So let's talk about processed meat. We've been talking about burgers and fries and things like that, but let's shift over to the cold cuts at Subway. So if somebody's getting like the salami, the ham, the turkey, the roast beef on the sandwich, what is that doing in terms of their heart health?
Right. Well, we're talking about cold cuts, but really, if we think about McDonald's burgers as well, I know a lot of people think it's just beef. It's a beef patty, right? That's red meat. It's not quite as bad. But if we think about what processed meat is, it's meat that has been cured, salted, smoked, or had preservatives added to extend its shelf life. And if we go down and look at a McDonald's burger, well, it's been salted. Sometimes it's had preservatives added. I'm not sure if they do that in America anymore. But really, McDonald's burgers can also be considered processed meat technically. But if we're thinking about heart health, these processed meats are so high in saturated fat and cholesterol, but saturated fat is the bigger problem. And I'll tell you why. So normally, we have these LDL cholesterol molecules floating in our blood, right? And the liver pops out these receptors and it grabs these LDL cholesterol molecules out of our blood and it keeps the levels normal. When we eat a diet high in saturated fat, it reduces the number of these receptors or these hands that the liver has. So now suddenly the liver's sitting there with tied hands and it can't fish these cholesterol molecules out of our blood anymore. And so the levels keep rising. So the saturated fat is so concerning in these processed meats. The cholesterol also does play a role. And again, we have to talk about the carcinogens. I know we're talking about heart health, but processed meats are a type 1 carcinogen, right? You have all of these cancer-causing molecules in these processed meats. You eat this, these molecules go and they directly attack the cells in your colon, lining your intestine, damages that DNA and can cause colorectal cancer, which is another huge problem in America, especially in people under the age of 50. We're seeing a rise in the number of colorectal cancer cases in people under the age of 50. And again, I think processed meat is playing a big role in that.
Yeah, I want to go back to the McDonald's beef patty you were just talking about. So on their website, again, it lists the ingredients as a 100% pure USDA inspected beef, no fillers, no extenders. I want to say, and you would have to fact check me on this, but I do want to say that it was McDonald's that got in hot water for using what they called pink slime in their beef. That was, I believe, the filler that they're talking about here. But they do also say that the meat has been treated with grill seasoning, which is salt and black pepper. Yeah, I want to bring up another point. I think that this is a fair one as well. That big 910 calorie meal only had about 7 or 8 grams of fiber in it. Stephen Turner at 1219 says only about 8 grams of fiber for about 1,000 calories. Yikes. That did seem a little bit on the low side for me, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. We should be, well, the dietary guidelines for Americans say that we should be aiming for around 14 grams per 1,000 calories in our diet. We at the Physicians Committee obviously say get a lot more. There isn't really an upper limit on how much fiber that you can get. If you're eating too much, your gut will let you know. Otherwise, we suggest aiming for around 40 grams or more per day. So if we're just going by the dietary guidelines for Americans, which are not the greatest, heavily influenced. And they're saying get a minimum of 14 grams per 1,000 calories. And this meal sitting at 7 grams per 1,000 calories. It really, really is an absolute disaster.
Guys, if you have a question for Dr. Becker, post it in the comments or in the chat right now. Let us know what is on your mind. We can open it up and talk about some other things nutrition-wise, but I really just wanted to bring this survey to the attention of everyone because it really shows how much more work there is still to do. And I think that, Dr. Becker, if somebody were just to go and speak to their local hospital, yeah, it starts with one voice. But if you were to bring, say, a petition with a lot of signatures, that could make a big difference. If you work with your local media to bring up some more attention, put the pressure on these hospitals as well, that can make a big difference. So yeah, it starts with one voice. But if somebody wants to get involved, Dr. Becker, I think that this would be a great jumping off point for them.
Yeah, it really would. And I think with fast food restaurants, it might be a bit tricky and change might take a long time. I think some of these fast food restaurants may have extended agreements with hospitals for how many years that they're allowed to be in there. But of course, you know, the more noise we make about this, if we stop buying from there and it's not profitable, right, that'll probably shut down. So the more noise we can make, the more information we can get out there, the better.
Mindy is wondering why. Why, in your opinion, is nutrition not taught more in medical schools?
That's a great question, Mindy. I have the same question. I really do. You know, diet is the biggest risk factor for chronic diseases. There was a global burden of disease study published in 2018. And it said that diet was the biggest risk factor above tobacco smoking, above sedentary lifestyle. I mean, the evidence is there. It's just taking a long time for curriculums to change. And I think one of the biggest issues is that the board exams that examine medical students that really set the tone for the curriculum taught at medical schools, they don't have many nutrition questions. So medical schools are quite hesitant to then devote 20, 30 hours of lectures to nutrition if the students aren't going to be examined on it. So we really need to focus on a multi-pronged approach. We need to update the board exams. We need to get more lectures, more time devoted to it. And we're targeting all of that. But largely it's just because it hasn't been the standard, it hasn't been the norm, and change, unfortunately, takes a long time.
Extropian transhuman. I'm just going to call them ET for short. That is hard to say. Extropian transhuman at 1226. Is there a vegan hospital manual book out there to keep fast food out by chance? I don't know, Dr. Becker, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a particular manual. But if you and I were to look north about 400 miles to New York City, what they're doing with their New York City Health and Hospitals program and see all of the vegan options that are being offered there, I think that that is a great blueprint for other hospitals to follow.
It really is, Chuck. And hospitals and any business, really, it comes down to the money, right? And New York, the New York Healthy Hospital Program found that when they serve plant-based meals, it was actually cheaper than including meat and eggs and dairy and everything. So it comes down to the money. We have published research saying that plant-based diets are cheaper. So you could always take that to your hospital as well.
All right. Catherine McDonough at 1227. Why aren't doctors and nurses jumping up and down about poor nutrition in hospitals? I am a nurse practitioner, and there's just not enough of us speaking out. How would you recommend being a doctor yourself starting to rally the troops?
Whew. It is a difficult challenge. It's quite the challenge, right? I think the first thing it comes down to leading by example and being an advocate in whatever community you're in, whatever hospital you work at, if it's a medical school, wherever you are, be a voice, get this information out there. I think a lot of healthcare professionals, they like things to be evidence-based, science-based, right? We want to know the facts and have research to back up what we're saying. So arm yourselves with the latest research and facts and papers, and just share that with anyone you come into contact with. Start by educating patients, start by educating all of the colleagues that you work with, and educating yourself with the facts. And every person that you influence will then go on to influence someone else. And eventually it's like a small drop in the ocean that has a huge effect.
Quick update from Germany. Karen Price, going back over there, says, I've experienced eating as a patient in 3 German hospitals and visited some others too, and they do offer cold cuts quite regularly. It is Germany after all. So maybe it's not a fast food restaurant, but it's just on the regular hospital menu. And those two, again, looking to New York for the answers there, they've really got that down to a science. And as you said, cost savings are huge in New York with the volume of patients. I think that that is just amazing what they're doing there. By the way, if you have not yet had the opportunity to check out the interview that we did recently with dietitian Lily Correa, who is helping to spearhead this program up there. We did this a couple of weeks ago. Definitely worth checking out. She goes over kit and caboodle, everything that they're doing there and the impact that it's having on the community. And it is extraordinary. And as a matter of fact, here's some good news, Dr. Becker. There are hospitals from around the country and even around the world who are calling her and saying, hey, how can we implement this in our system as well? And that, to me, is the biggest sign of hope.
That's amazing. That is so encouraging.
I want to end with this. I think that this is kind of fun because I've never been to South Africa, although fun fact, my best friend in middle school was from South Africa. He taught me a little bit of Afrikaans, not that I remember any of it.
Okay.
I know.
I was about to ask you to say something.
It's just not going to happen because I'm sure that the words that he taught me were inappropriate for air anyway. But anyway, I'm curious, like, what are some of the first things that you noticed in terms of the differences between the food that is being served here in the States versus what you were used to back home in South Africa?
The first thing, Chuck, is that the portion sizes here are enormous compared to the portion sizes back home. I'll just use the example of popcorn, right? I don't go to the movies often. I maybe go once a year. It's such a treat. And back home, if you order a large popcorn, it's enough for you and a friend, right? Or, at a push, you could probably finish it yourself, but it's a decent size. So I came to the States last year and I went to movies with a friend and I thought, let's just get a large popcorn for the both of us. We share it, it'll be fine. Oh my goodness. It was this big. It was enough to feed like a family of four. It was humongous. And the sodas, don't even get me started. It's like the bottle that you get out of the stores is what you're getting in a single cup instead of just, a small portion. So the portion sizes are humongous. And I have to tell you, everything tastes sweeter and fattier. And I haven't compared nutrition labels side by side, so I don't know if the ingredients are different, but things here just feel like they can contain a lot more fat and a lot more sugar. And I know that when friends have moved here from South Africa, they eat the same foods and they tend to gain a lot of weight here. And I think that food is just made a lot more hyper palatable, right? More sugar, salt, and fat to make it more addictive, right? Those are some of the ingredients or properties that make these foods so addictive. And the fresh produce, fruits and vegetables, have no flavor compared to back home. All the fruit tastes the same. It's very watery. It's not very sweet. It doesn't have distinct flavor. Whereas you go back home or to many other different countries in Africa or South America, and you taste all these wonderful, wonderful flavors. And so I feel like in America, food has become so processed, so hyper palatable that we can't even really appreciate the normal sweetness of fruits and vegetables and whole foods. So a lot needs to change, unfortunately. And I miss the fruit and vegetables back home. Let me tell you that.
I would love to visit back home with you just so I could taste the difference. I'd be very curious to see what a drastic change there is. I believe that with South Africa being on the southern hemisphere right now, it is going into summertime. So maybe next winter we'll go take a trip back home and take a break from our winter and enjoy some delicious fruit.
Maybe we can take the exam room on a little road trip.
I like where your head's at. I like where your head's at. Hey, listen, Dr. Becker, thank you so very much. I look forward to having you back on the show. Welcome to the team here at the Physicians Committee. You're off to a great start. Can't wait to see what the future holds for you.
All right. Thanks, Chuck.
Dr. Roxanne Becker, she's the best. Hey, listen, this is not a manual for hospitals, but if you are a plant-based athlete who's looking to get into the game of nutrition, head over to pcrm.org/athlete to pick up our free ebook, our nutrition guide for vegan athletes. And automatically, just by grabbing the book, you will become an exam room VIP so you can get our monthly newsletter. Stay up to date with the upcoming guests. You'll be the first to know when tickets go on sale for our big live and in-person shows and a whole lot more, plus the free ebook for vegan athletes. That's at pcrm.org/athletes. And for today, my friends, that is all the time that we have. I want to say thank you one more time to Dr. Becker for being here and opening our eyes when it comes to this amazing hospital food survey. I mean, I call it the revolving door of death for a reason. And I think that just by looking at that nutrition calculation from that one meal at the fast food restaurant, we can see why. There's so much more room to do. Also want to say thank you to the crew behind the scenes for making the magic happen, and to you exam roomies for bringing us the global flavor today and raising our health IQs around the world. And for everybody here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We will talk to you again very soon, but until then, keep it plant-based.